Okay, so there may be a gray bar on the right-hand side, but I think we'll be fine. Can you all see the whole picture?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, okay, great. So this particular presentation was put together by Rami Yanez down in California, and I've updated it for our area and for changes. He originally wrote this about 5 years ago, and been a lot of changes. This document also has ADSB, which if we have time and want to discuss it, we certainly can. But the primary purpose is to discuss PowerFlarm. So PowerFlarm came about in Europe, and part of it is because in Europe, their glider flying is much more constrained than in the United States. In Europe, the gliders can only fly in class Gulf airspace. They're not permitted in Delta, Echo, or, well, they have Foxtrot. Excuse me just a second. Close my door so I'm not talking to the whole household here. So what we have in this picture here is a situation that is very common in Europe, mountainous, a lot of white terrain. And where do you think the danger is here? I'm sure everyone can see this glider above, but can you see this glider right here?
Hardly.
Yeah. And if we were actually in the situation, we may actually have a better chance of seeing it only because it would be moving from what it's set up like. But most of the problems had to do with gliders running at high speed along very narrow corridors along the Alps. And when a glider is coming at you at high speed, head on, there's not much to see until they get really, really close. And that might be too late to do any evasive maneuvers. So the FLARM system was developed in Switzerland and has been widely accepted in Europe and in the last 8 or 9 years in the US. So what is FLARM? FLARM is a collision avoidance system. And initially it was designed, as I said, primarily for glider pilots. However, what they've discovered is that there are a lot of traffic situations, even ground-based traffic situations, where a PowerFlarm type system is quite useful. Insofar as what we're concerned about, it is a warning system that warns us where other FLARM-equipped aircraft are. Now, that's not the only thing that it will do, but that's what it does primarily. It gives us the location of nearby FLARM-equipped gliders. So recently, Mark and I and another gentleman by the name of Alex Winbow were flying there on the wave in Hood River. And it was very easy to keep track of where they were. Are they behind me? Are they in front of me? Are they climbing? Are they not climbing? All of that was very easy to see with the FLARM. Now, all of us had FLARMs, but of course, it should be obvious that if another glider doesn't have a FLARM, then it's not going to be seen or be able to see the FLARM-equipped gliders. There's a very special thing about this system, and that is the algorithms within the collision avoidance portion is able to understand and anticipate what gliders are going to do. So the fact that we are circling in a thermal doesn't necessarily mean that we have a collision close by, even though there's a glider very close to us. So those are some of the special things that PowerFlarm has that a traffic awareness system that might be installed in a general aviation aircraft or airliner, they wouldn't have that understanding of what the glider was doing. PowerFlarm receives transponder signals from both Mode C transponders and ADS-B Mode S transponders. But unfortunately, just because the other aircraft has a transponder doesn't mean they can see you unless they also have PowerFlarm. Now, the nice thing is that general aviation aircraft today are required to have ADS-B in most of the places that we're likely to find them. And as such, we'll be able to see them, but unfortunately, they won't be able to see us unless we also have a transponder on board. Okay, so what happens? The PowerFlarm has a built-in GPS. It's unique to it. When I say it's unique to it, it's not a GPS that you're necessarily have to install in addition to the PowerFlarm. It's part of the PowerFlarm. And it also has a very accurate pressure sensor. So it knows what pressure altitude that the unit is at any given time. Given the GPS position and the pressure altitude, it calculates the flight path that the glider is performing and transmits that information and receives information from other aircraft in the area. So it's basically a radio network where every node or every point in the network is transmitting information about its motion, and every other PowerFlarms in the network are calculating whether or not I'm a danger to them at the moment. They issue warnings, and it's really important to understand that the warning is issued in accordance with time. So how quickly is a collision likely to occur? So it's not distance, it's time. But as you see in the next line, it's only 6 to 8 seconds from the possible collision. Now, that's not quite true. There is an initial warning at about 30 seconds and a secondary warning at about 15 seconds. And then it really starts squawking at you when it gets down to 6 to 8 seconds. But if you haven't found the other glider by then, you don't have a lot of time, not much time left to do something. In addition to giving you warnings, the distance, the bearing, the altitude, and also in the more modern systems, the rate of climb of the aircraft, the other glider, are displayed. So if someone happens to be in a good thermal out in front of you 2 miles away, you can tell and go over and join them, which is a little bit annoying for people in contests who like to be able to outclimb everyone else. But when everyone knows how well you're climbing, it takes away some tactical advantage. The PowerFlarm also receives ADS-B targets. Now, ADS-B is something that we may have time to talk about, but in brief, it is a collision awareness system very similar to PowerFlarm. PowerFlarm was developed long before ADS-B was broadly available, but ADS-B also has a GPS, its own GPS. It also has a pressure altitude, and it also transmits its motion and speed. So the PowerFlarm can receive that data and supply warnings relative to ADS-B also. And lastly, the PowerFlarm receives Mode C transponder signals, but a Mode C transponder just sends a signal out in all directions and doesn't have a GPS. And so the only thing that the PowerFlarm can do is, based upon the strength of the signal, kind of estimate how far away it is, but not the direction, and just give you a circle, a ring that says there's something this far away, but you've got to figure it out by looking around. Dwayne, did you have a question? Okay. So as I said, it's quite popular in Europe. Virtually all gliders, there's over 25,000 worldwide. Most of the cross-country pilots in Region 8, which is what we are part of, already have a power FLARM of some kind installed. And almost all contest pilots in the United States do. We also have power FLARM in some powered aircraft, and in Europe, drones are also equipping with power FLARM or with FLARM. So there's lots of interest in it, and lots of people trying to use it. Now, when it first came out, there were a lot of people that said, well, you know, we don't really need this. Mid-airs are fairly rare. But in fact, mid-airs are not rare. And since the power FLARM has been used in Europe, there have been virtually no mid-airs. Some people say, well, it's expensive. Well, they typically cost about the same as a parachute, and you're going to use them every time you fly. So it's just like the parachute, but you don't jump out of the airplane every time. The next statement is true. It's not very effective unless other pilots are using it. If you're the only person with the power FLARM, there's not much advantage to it, except you will be able to see power traffic and know that it's coming around. Some people think that the midair is a low risk element, but that's really not true. It's the second most common source of fatalities in gliders. And then the last one is people don't think they need it because they can use see and avoid just fine without it. And as you saw in that one picture, yes, if conditions are just right, you can pretty much see anybody around you, but it is surprising, absolutely incredible. I have flown Cirrus airplanes for, well, since 2004, and every single one of them was equipped with a collision avoidance system that showed me where every glider or airplane in the area were. And it was absolutely incredible to me that it would show me exactly where to look. And I would look there and look there and look there and couldn't see it, even though I knew it was a mile to a mile and a half away and either at my level or slightly higher, slightly lower. Your eyes just aren't as good as you might think they are. I think this middle statement, I'm willing to take the collision risk, is probably the epitome of a stupidity statement. Nobody is willing to take a collision risk. I'm not, you shouldn't. And we do everything we can to avoid it. The idea of the first statement, the big sky theory, you know, big sky, little plane, there's lots of room, you know, we're not going to get together. But in the environment that you guys fly on the ridge, because of the nature of ridge flying, because of the nature of some wave flying, a lot of people want to be in the same place at the same time. And that makes it a bit more of a challenge to keep track of everyone. Some people think it's complicated to install. It really isn't. And when they first came out, there were some problems, but those problems have all been ironed out. And everyone, without exception, everyone I've ever talked to who has one installed wouldn't fly without it. Okay, saves lives, situational awareness. Find where to tow to, find thermals because other people are in them, decide where to go next. You can compare climb rates. All of them are flight recorders. So they will record your flight. They've got the GPS data, and you can use that to go back and study your flight, see what you could have done better or what you did very well. This one thing about buddy flying, sometime you're going to have to talk to Mark about the lead and follow work that he and I did down in Northern California this last August. Without Power FLARM, it would have been very hard to keep track of where he was relative to me or I was relative to him. And so it makes the process of teaching cross country in particular, or flying together for any reason, much easier to accomplish because you know where the other people are. Another thing that's not mentioned in this particular presentation, there is something called FLARMnet. And FLARMnet is a website where you go and tell them your FLARM's particular serial code and your contest identifier or your IN number, whichever one you want to do. And then you can download that data into your FLARM or into your display device. And when you see a FLARM signal, it's not just a little triangle. It actually has the name of the person, or I should say the contest number or the IN number of that person. So you know who it is, not just where it is and what's happening. All right, so there's basically 3 FLARM devices. Actually, there's more than 3 right now, but in general, these are the 3 that are available. Classic FLARM is the type of FLARM that started out in Europe. The radio frequency it uses is incompatible with other frequency uses in the United States, so it's not legal to use it here and not available in general. Then we have something called a Power FLARM core or brick, and it's basically just a box that you hook an antenna into, and it outputs data that you have to display somewhere. And we're going to look at some of that later, but I'm going to hold something up here, kind of tough to see, but this is a little unit that fits in an instrument panel, and it displays, we're going to look at a closer picture of it later, but it displays the FLARM data. So if I had a FLARM core installed and didn't have any other way to display it, I can have a little screen like this that goes into the panel in the small hole of a panel. On the other hand, there's something called a Power FLARM and a Power FLARM portable, which is a completely integral unit. The receiver is there, the display is there. You put 6 alkaline batteries in it, and it runs for about 2.5 hours on those 6 alkaline batteries. Or you can plug it into the ship power and it'll run on 12 volts, and it only draws about 150 milliamperes. So it doesn't really cause much of a drain. And that's what I'm installing in all of the gliders in Willamette Valley, all of the club gliders that we fly cross country in. There are some newer things that have come out, but they still are pretty much the same concept. You install an electronics box behind the panel. The most modern one is called the Fusion, the Power FLARM Fusion. And it basically does all the same things. It's just an updated, newer version. Okay, well, this is what Ramey was telling everyone down in California. He said, get a brick. And the only real difference between them is just the user interfaces. That's the only thing. The FLARM View 57 that he's talking about right there is this little unit that I'm holding up here. And then these other things, ClearNav, LXNav, CU, XCSOAR, are all flight computer software, which if you can talk to them from the FLARM using a Bluetooth or using a cable, then you can see them there. And that's what I have in my cockpit. I have a large screen, and all of my FLARM and ADS-B data appears there. There is something called stealth mode, which I think at this point, the FLARM company has has decided they really wish they hadn't ever implemented that. But basically, if you're in stealth mode, no one can see you until a collision is uh, potentially imminent. And one of the things about getting one of these is you really need to read the manual. They are easy to operate and they provide a lot of information, but unless you know what they're showing you, it's not going to be all that good. Now, one of the comments that Ramey makes here a little bit later, I think, is he says, even if you think it's too complex for you to use, turn it on so we can see you, even if you aren't interested in seeing us. When it's installed and configured properly, you can see this says 2 to 4 miles. I've seen as far as 6 miles away, 8 miles away. It's not that hard to go out and find people when you're all equipped like this. There is an online tool called FLARM Range, which allows you to look at whether or not your particular configuration is optimized for your aircraft. Some aircraft gliders, which have a carbon structure, may not want to put their antennas in the same place as in my glider, for example, which is all fiberglass. It doesn't care. It's almost transparent to the signals. Mode C and ADS-B, I've seen aircraft 25, 30 miles away on ADS-B, and 2 or 3 or 4 or 15,000 feet above me. Mode C, on the other hand, while it is detected, it's not precise. It's based on the strength of the signal to estimate how far away the particular target is. And if you have someone that has a very poor signal on their transponder, it may in fact mean that they're very close to you when it says that they're quite far away. The portables, very easy to set up. 6 batteries, and you can move it to another glider as you want to. In the Willamette Club, we have had a couple of them for quite a while, the portables, and sometimes they got used and sometimes they didn't. One of my tasks this winter in my maintenance work with the club is to put a mounting system in each of the cross-country gliders so that the FLARM portable is a permanent installation as much as possible. And that way we all turn them on and we all see each other, and that's all very useful. One of the things that is important is that the FLARM is configured. And by configuring, we're telling it what aspects of it we want to be able to use. We want to look up or down how many thousands of feet. So you can set it up so it only looks up or down 2,000 feet, which is kind of nice because it reduces the number of targets that might appear on the screen to confuse you. But it sometimes is a little bit challenging to set it up the first time. Once you set it up, it works pretty well after that, and you don't really have to do much. One of the things that the FLARM company is doing is constantly upgrading the quality of what they're doing, adding new features actually in some cases. And they basically started about 3.5 years ago, they started a program where you want to upgrade your firmware at least once per year. If I upgrade it now, it will continue to operate for 1.5 years. But after 1.5 years, if I don't upgrade it sometime within that 1.5 years, it'll stop working. And so it's important to understand that this software needs to be updated regularly. It's not a one time and leave it. I mentioned already the FLARNet and the FLARNet database. Every time I download it, there's new things in there. Friends of mine get gliders, or I change gliders, which I have before, and I need to update the database and download it so they we all get the right data. Okay, so we're going to talk here for just a few moments, and then we're going to look at some other, look at a couple of documents. So with the FLARM portable, it has a very big button on it, and you push that button for 3 seconds, and then it wakes up and it says, you know, this is not the only thing in the world that you should use for traffic awareness. And you press OK, and it goes on and it starts to show you things. The knob is used to change how far out you're going to look. You press and hold the button for about 5 seconds and it'll turn off. And this is the comment I mentioned earlier. If you don't know how to use it or don't trust or care about it, just turn it on so the rest of us can see you. And if you have any problems, just contact FLARM Chief. This is what the display looks like. And it looks the same on the portable as it does on this little box that I've got, this little panel mount. And by the way, you can take a FLARM and install it somewhere in your glider where you may not even be able to reach it, and run a cable and run one of these and still see this same information. So in this particular image, what you have is it's zoomed out initially to 8 nautical miles. The battery looks like about 80% full. And you've got a glider that is 300 feet below you descending. That one is within your 8 miles, closer to 4 miles. You got 2 other pluses, well, plus and a minus, 2 other green ones, a plus and a minus, one above you, one below you. And then you've got this green ring. And this green ring is a mode C. And as it gets closer to you, it turns from green to red. And you can see that when you zoom in, as it gets closer, you turn the knob and you zoom in, and it's 300 feet above you descending. And in your particular area, that would not be an unusual thing to see, because I've seen airplanes flying through the gorge coming over the top of your East Ridge descending. It's pretty amazing. One of the things to remember is that this is not the end all be all. You're going to have to still look around. It helps you to know where to look a lot of the time. But it's a great deal more information than you would have if you were strictly trying to use a visual scan to look for other traffic. Yeah, we've already talked about most of this. Nice thing is that when you have the display, your glider is always in the center of the display, and the other gliders are in a clock direction from you. So something directly in front of you would appear, no matter what your heading is, would appear directly off the nose of your screen if it was directly in front of you. This particular thing about making a glance at the display to determine the bearing and make visual contact and take an evasive action. I'm not sure whether push or pull is better or not, but the fact of the matter is you probably ought to try to do something if you can. Okay, I think that's the end of that one. Yeah, so let's turn on the, I'm going to stop this share. I'm going to pick up a different share, but at the same time, why don't you turn on your microphones or turn on your picture so I know who wants to ask a question if anyone does. Anybody still awake? I put everybody to sleep. That's the problem.
Hey, microphone Montag, is there any other displays that you can use with this, or is it sort of a proprietary display?
No, that's what I was saying before is when you say other displays, what are you referencing?
Well, like on ADSB, you can use your iPad for a display screen. Can we do that with this? I mean, there's not that much room in a cockpit and a glider, but just curious.
Well, the question is, will your other display device understand a FLARM output? The answer is probably not. So I fly with ForeFlight. I've flown with something called AvAir on Android devices. And neither one of those knows anything about a FLARM database or a FLARM data signal. So, so the answer is no, it's not going to be displayed on a Garmin device, on a Garmin 1000 or a 650 or a 430 or any of those other Garmin devices, because they don't have a protocol that, or they don't have a driver in there that allows them to accept that protocol and display it. They wouldn't know what to do with it, I guess is the point.
Okay.
On the other hand, if we go to something like just the basic FLARM display or XC-SOAR or some of these other glider programs, they accept everything. They accept the TIS-B from the Garmin, they accept ADS-B-N, they accept virtually all of that stuff. So if I had to have one display, I wouldn't be looking for something like a tablet. I'd be looking, well, unless I could hook it up to the FLARM, I would be looking for, I wouldn't be looking for a general aviation solution. I'd be looking at a more of a glider solution and use it even in a general aviation device. Several of these machines do have the ability to output the data via Bluetooth. So the new Fusion has Bluetooth output. A couple of the other ones have Bluetooth output. I have a device called an LXS8 in my cockpit, which receives directly the data from the Power FLARM and sends that data onto my XC-SOAR device, but I could hook it up to a Bluetooth dongle and send it to anything that's listening. So like an UDI or one of the other, your iPhone running something like iGlide is all a possibility.
But not practical, or there's really not much advantage to it. Trying to have multiple appearances on one device or on one display.
Well,
may not be a good question.
I'm not quite sure I'm following the question. So the point is I have a display. I'll show you a picture of it here in a second. I have a display which is as big as a tablet, and it's my flight computer, and it shows me virtually everything. But I have a page on that display. I do click one button, and it shows me only FLARM traffic in a display that's 7 inches diagonally. So I get quite a bit of detail there.
Okay.
But at the same time, my normal map display or navigation display, in addition to showing me navigation data, shows me FLARM aircraft and ADS-B aircraft. So I still get all of that same visibility, I guess is my point.
Okay, thanks.
So on the screen right now is the front of the portable unit. And the portable units, there are people selling them used for about $1,400. They go new for about $1,800. So that's just the current going rate. So this button right here is the button to push, and the screen is right there, and it shows up just like we saw. Over here on the left-hand side is a slot for a micro SD card, which is where you would pull your flight traces out so that you could go study them at home, something like that. It's also where you put a card to update the software. It's pretty easy to do, actually. It's easier to do on the portable unit than it is on my my core unit. Let me see what else I wanted to show you here before I quit. Yeah, I think we've already seen good pictures. So in fact, they're using the same pictures as these. Here are several other displays. The one that I've been showing you is this one in the lower left. That's a FLARM View 57. So it shows quite a bit more data. It also shows you the strength of the signal up here in the upper right corner, the range down here, etc. It shows you north, south, east, and west based on not your heading, but actual north, south, east, and west. So if you were flying northwest, this point here would be in front of you and north would be off to your right, upper right. You can put an ID in and follow someone specifically, which is what these kind of data tell you. A lot of information. So this lower line is that little box that I was talking about. The upper box is another type of display. It's approximately the same size, and it does display a lot of the same information. It has this clock diagram, which mine can show as well. And this would tell you that there's a target about your same level off to your right and behind your wing. And so that's pretty good. It's got some buttons here to allow you to change some values, zoom up, zoom down, that sort of thing. So that's another one of the displays that is independent of having whatever kind of FLARM that you have. Okay, standby one.
Hey, Mike, while
Yeah.
you're looking there, we had a question in the chat box. Should the tow plane be equipped with power FLARM since it frequently operates in the same airspace as other gliders, or is the mandatory ADS-B transponder sufficient?
Well, the answer is, I think that if the ADS-B is there, that's fine. We've had a couple of situations in the last 8 months where there was a collision between a tow plane and a glider. The glider was equipped with FLARM. The tow plane was not equipped with anything other than a Mode C transponder, which is technically still possible if you're flying in an airspace that doesn't require a transponder. You know, uncontrolled airports outside of Class Delta, to the off the lateral limits of a Class Charlie or Class Bravo, but not above 10,000 feet. I mean, there's a lot of different places you could fly and not have ADS-B. And many of the glider ports are those kind of remote places. So the answer is, I believe it's a good thing to have at least a transponder. Willamette Valley has a transponder. So at least we know approximately how far away the tow pilot is. I think another thing that is important for avoiding collision between tow pilots and gliders is that people follow the correct protocol for which direction they turn, and that they don't necessarily make a complete 360-degree turn, which has been a little bit of a problem a few times. Other questions? And do you want me to continue with ADS-B or not?
I would just add in on that. I don't know if you were aware of the situation the other day, Mark, where I was flying the tow plane. Of course, it wouldn't have helped in this situation because the L-33 had a dead battery, but I had no idea he was coming in, and I was on base, and I was looking for you because I dropped you off on a pattern. So I had you in sight, and I had no idea the L-33 was even there. Stan waved me off on the radio, and I never did get sight of that until I came around and saw both the gliders on the same runway. I don't know how that happened either. But in this situation, FLARM wouldn't have helped because, like I say, the L-33 had a dead battery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you aware of that situation, Mark?
I was aware after I was on the ground and I heard Stan telling you to go around.
I never did catch sight of that, of the other glider. I don't know if he was on base when Stan waved me off or not.
I mean, the way it was described to me that it wasn't close, but that he waved you off at an appropriate time where it definitely created enough separation. But the pilot of the L-33 was highly focused on you and didn't and was in their mind already just like landing on pavement and didn't know that we had landed in front of them. And so, but also they did see us, and I mean, they should have sidestepped and taken the grass, but they landed very short on the pavement.
Oh, so he scratched the nose again.
Was that the flight with me, Mark?
It was you or Jonathan, maybe
Yeah.
Kieran.
Okay.
Okay, well, let me start here for just a moment. I'm showing you my cockpit. Can you all see that picture?
Yeah.
Okay, so this large screen, it's got a 7-inch diagonal. It's a power FLARM. Excuse me, it's a what's called an open Vario, but it's running the same thing that you would have on a tablet. And right now I'm sitting on beside my house, so there's nothing in the picture. But normally I would have other gliders. This device over on the right is the S8. It can also show me power FLARM data. So I have two different devices ready to tell me that there's people coming around. Of course, this altimeter or airspeed over here, altimeter. This is my radio, and then this is my transponder, and my transponder is ADS-B out. So I have in from my FLARM and out from my ADS-B. So I'm pretty well equipped to be seen and reasonably well equipped to be able to see other people. All right, so back to the question. Do you want to continue with an understanding of ADS-B, or are we not interested in that tonight?
I think we got time, Mike. Unless others have like a lot of power FLARM questions.
Yeah, I guess, Mike, if you do have time, we have a member in our audience who basically has never seen a glider up close except once. So, and all of this is great information.
Okay, well, if we move on to ADS-B, that's not necessarily specific that much to gliders, but I'll be happy to cover the material. Stand by. Oh, come on. Okay, so ADS-B stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, and it was established in 2010 as an international technology, and the US has been one of the last countries to fully implement it, or at least implement it enough to meet the needs of the rest of the world. So it basically, as I said before, it has a GPS, it has a transponder, and it has a pressure altimeter. So it knows how high it is, how fast it's moving. It calculates that data and it sends it all out. The data is then used by whatever device is receiving it. So it doesn't really do anything except say, here I am, and this is how high I am and where I'm going and how fast I'm moving. One of the interesting parts about this technology, and if you go and look at some of the information that was published about 5 years ago on it, people didn't understand that an ADS-B transponder does not have to be in range of a radar station in order to broadcast its data. A traditional transponder means a transmitting responder is a device which, when a radar signal hits it, it replies and says a number of pieces of data depending on what type of transponder it is, mode C or mode S or whatever. But an ADS-B transponder, if things go really quiet, it basically sends out its own interrogation, basically saying, all right, who's around here? Anybody around? And it's listening after that to see if anyone else is. And if there are two aircraft close by to each other, even though they may not be painted by a radar sweep, they're still going to be communicating with each other, and they're still going to be providing collision information to one another. So that makes it far superior to the standard mode C transponders, or the ones that came before it. Now, transponders are never required for a glider. And that's an important concept to come up with, is that it's never required for a glider to have a transponder. Now, this is a historical result from the fact that in early days of gliding and in the early days of transponders, the transponders used up so much energy that the gliders couldn't carry enough battery power to keep it running for more than an hour or two. In today's environment, batteries have much improved and transponders have gotten far more efficient in their power. Now, I have all of that electronics that you saw on my panel, and I have one battery. It's a 12 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery, but I can fly for 4.5, 5 hours without dropping the voltage below a safe level for all of my equipment to operate. And so nowadays, putting a transponder in a glider is not technologically as difficult as it used to be. So gliders don't have to worry about it too much. But you notice that there is this requirement of 10,000 feet. And interestingly, many of our gliders do go above 10,000 feet. And the question is still a little bit gray whether or not, when we as glider pilots fly above 10,000 feet, whether it's required that we have a transponder. But that so far has not been definitively answered. So it's not required, but many of us have decided to put them in our gliders for the reason of being visible to general aviation traffic. So this is another point relative to Hood River. you know, you guys are right in the approach path, two different approach paths into Portland from the east. Fly almost directly overhead. And they would be able to see you and know that you were there. And usually the altitude difference is such that they don't care and you don't care. However, a lot of general aviation traffic, and it says many now carry, actually all of them now carry, with the exception of those that try to avoid being in that airspace. They have ADS-B in and out, most of them, and it allows them to see you. You get to see them with a power FLARM, and that's one of the challenges in having both a power FLARM and a transponder. If you only had the transponder, you'd see all of this general aviation traffic and you would see other gliders with transponders, but you wouldn't necessarily see anyone else. And you'd have to have some kind of display system, very much similar to what Ron was saying. You got to have some way to see it. But it's interesting, the regulation that the FAA has put forth says everybody has to have ADS-B out. Nobody has to have ADS-B in except for the airlines. And probably some 135 charter companies. The point is that it's a nice additional piece of data. I don't know how many of you are familiar with something called a spot or an inReach. These are tracking tools that allow your position to be transmitted to satellites on a periodic basis of your choosing. You get a subscription to, and you have one of these pieces of hardware, and it transmits to the satellite. So if you had any problem where you landed out and you needed to communicate, you'd push a button on these devices, and it sends up a signal to the satellite saying, you know, Mike Bamberg just landed here and needs help. Now, I have one of these also. It also helps you to be located quickly. So does ADS-B, much better than it used to be. So is it expensive? And the answer is yes. If you want to put in a Mode S transponder and your glider is experimental, it will cost you around, to get all the pieces, it will cost you around $3,200 or $3,300. If you already have one of the Trig Mode S transponders, it's about $500 to bring it up to ADS-B out. So it's really not expensive if you're already equipped with a Mode S transponder. Again, it's not necessary. It only helps other people see you that might not see you otherwise. So this is what I have in mind. I have a Trig TT22 250 watt transponder with a TN72 GPS. And as an experimental glider, I meet 100% all the requirements to be fully ADS-B out. And it wasn't difficult for me to install that additional piece of equipment, the TN72. If you have a certified glider, you would have to, you could add that same information or that same GPS to a TT21 or a 22, and you become a TABS device. The TABS device is not a fully ADS-B compliant device, but it can be seen by all the traffic people that want to see you, and it just doesn't meet all the requirements. And this is this is a little concession that the FAA made about 2014 when people started complaining, because in 2014, if you wanted to add ADS-B to a general aviation aircraft, it was going to cost you between $10,000 and $15,000. Now you can do it with a TABS device. You can do it for, like I said, about $3,300. If you want to have a fully compliant system in a certified glider, that's a standard category certified glider, you have to install a different GPS, this TN70, and it costs quite a bit more. So, all right. Well, if you want to get done doing it, we recommend that you get the TT22. The difference in cost between the two is less than the $900 shown here as an upgrade charge. It's about $2,200 for a TT21 and $2,700 or $2,800 for a 22. And then it's $350 for the GPS, and off you go. This is basically what I did. I have full ADS-B in and out in addition to FLARM. I don't have this comment here was Ramey saying that he oftentimes had close calls, near misses with general aviation airliners. Now he flies down in the San Francisco Bay Area, east of Livermore, out again in a very high traffic area where airliners are going into the San Francisco Bay Area. And so there's approaches to San Jose, to San Francisco, to Oakland, and just a lot of traffic. Yeah, that's sometime when you finally get your airplane license, if you really want to have an experience, fly into the San Francisco Bay Area. It's pretty crazy. Okay, so that's about it for this one. Let me get rid of that. Turn it back over to Mark. And whatever you'd like to, if you have any questions, fine. And otherwise, we can all be done.
Hey, Mike, got a quick question for you. This is Steve.
Yes, Steve.
So you mentioned the TABS device, and I think I saw something in there that didn't allow you to fly into Alpha Bravo or Charlie airspace. Is that correct?
No, tabs can fly into everything.
Oh, it can. Okay. All right. So what was and can that be installed on a certified aircraft, or is that only eligible for
It's only no.
experimental?
So there's also another unit called a UAT, a Universal Access Transmitter. So all of the transponders that we've been talking about transmit on a frequency of 1090 megahertz. But again, the FAA, trying to placate everybody, said, well, you know, because that's so expensive, we'll let you have a different kind of device on a different frequency. So it's on 978 megahertz. And it outputs data and it receives data on that frequency only. And the airliners can't see you. The only thing that happens is that if you're in the vicinity of a repeater that the FAA is running, they will receive your data and retransmit it so that airliners in the area can see you. But if there is no repeater, then they can't see you.
Right. That'd be like a Stratus, something along those lines.
Well, the Stratix, let's talk about the Stratus or the Stratix. Those are receivers.
Right.
And both the Stratus and the Stratix can be equipped with both the 1090 and the 978 receivers. Mm-hmm. So it's not really those are just receivers. Now,
Right.
Stratus does make a transponder that is ADSB in and out. So some people who are putting together a panel for an airplane, rather than using a trig like we like, they're going to use a Stratus because it has a display for traffic. You know, if I had a light aircraft and it didn't have any of the other display systems, it didn't have any of the Garmin glass cockpit, it didn't have Alpen systems, it didn't have any of these other things, and I wanted to have ADSB out and in, I would go with the Stratus because it has on the transponder a little display and you can see the traffic around you. But it is 1090. It's not 978 UAT. So the UAT is only useful in an area where retransmission is available. Now, there are two of them in the Portland area, and I'm not aware of any east of you guys. So there's one near Scappoose, and there's one near Sandy, Oregon. And both of them receive signals, consolidate, and retransmit. But if you're more than, the estimate is if you're more than about 30 nautical miles away, they can't receive you.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, this has been awesome. This is obviously highly technical stuff. Does anybody else have any questions? Please feel free to ask a question.
So a couple of different questions I see over in the chat. Is FLARM an acronym? I don't think so. I think it stands for Flight Alarm, but I've never seen anything that suggests that. Yeah, Flight and Alarm. Someone else said that. Region 8, as we said before, Region 8 encompasses Oregon, Idaho, Western Montana, Washington, and Alaska. That's the SSA Region 8. And so when things happen in those areas relative to soaring or sanctions or contests, then they are part of the Region 8. And by the way, you guys are in Oregon. I am the SSA Oregon governor, which means that I'm supposed to be promoting soaring. How am I doing? Okay.
I did want to say also that let's see who I'm looking at, who our participants are, that our ASK 21 does have the portable FLARM in the back seat, and then it has a smaller display, I'm not sure what it's called, in the front seat. So we do have power.
I've seen that.
Yes, in our trainer. And our new high performance donated plane, the PIC 20D, has the power FLARM. My ship has the power FLARM. Kelly Cooper's ship has the power FLARM. And Tim O'Donnell's ship has the power FLARM, his STEMI, his self-launcher.
Yep.
So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this presentation by Mike, was that our trainer does have the power FLARM, and that we should, as a club, I think about as we're unifying our battery sources throughout the club, next start thinking about putting power FLARM into the L33 and the 232 and maybe the tow plane.
So Mark, or Mike said we should all read up on the manual on that. Is that available on our website? the manual for the FLARM?
I just downloaded it again. I'll be glad to forward it to you. It's a PDF file. That's what I was showing you pictures from.
Yeah, we should have that available on our website so that we all have easy access to it, I would think.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for letting me talk at you again. Everybody knows I like to talk.
Well, you're very knowledgeable, and we appreciate your time and your 3 decades of experience of soaring.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We've got a couple new people on the call tonight. We've got one of our newer club members, Dwayne, listening, and Audrey. Not to put you on the spot. But...
Yeah, Dwayne here. Hi, everyone. I'm basically here between SoCal and Hood River. Got a place in both locations, so I bounce between the two. And most of my soaring was in Texas before I moved out to Southern California. So trying to get current again is my work in progress. I was going to comment and say that I know the local soaring club here uses, what was I commenting on the, sorry, I said to you earlier, Mark. We use the, where is it? I said to you. A transponder, that's what I was thinking of. And it's actually got us out of a bunch of trouble because a couple of times we've had flight incursions into temporary flight restricted TFRs, and because we had the transponder on, we got out of jail free. I think if the club consensus was that if we didn't have the transponder, that we probably would have got into a lot more trouble. There's a bunch of TFRs that come up, get stood up fairly quickly. Presidential visits and that sort of thing, and thus it's easy to make a mistake around here. So with that being said, I'll throw it back to you, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dwayne. It's good to chat with you a little bit there. We don't have as much as that issue here. Mike's club is closer to Hillsborough class Delta airspace, and they have a little more issues with trying to stay out of it than we do.
Well,
Can pick
folks.
those up with forest fires though occasionally.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yes.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay, well, if there's no other burning power FLARM questions, that has definitely been a big help in a couple situations with in my own flying, and it's a great little tool.
Well, you folks have a good evening. I'm signing off.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You have a